Let's start with the latest data coming out this weekend, David.
Yep, and we're talking about, good morning, Angie, by the way. We're talking about PMI. It was released on the weekend, on Saturday to be exact, and 8-month low here. And you do have the different components of manufacturing actually showing softer numbers yet again. So I guess in terms of the specific areas of the economy that are having the most difficult time, you're looking at essentially two areas. Exporters, especially the smaller, medium-sized firms, which typically, of course, have very, very thin margins. Right. And the PMI for large companies, it was at 50.7, but the smaller ones, smaller and medium-sized companies, that actually fell into contraction. Well, it has been in a contraction. Yeah. There, new export orders. That's one of the components of PMI. Actually has been in a contraction now for a third straight month. Now, another area feeling the heat here, and this is what was pointed out by RBS, there's been a deceleration in investment, especially in these industries that rely on credit for growth, so things like infrastructure, areas like property, for example. Now, I also just want to mention, of course, while we look forward to this week, the RMB, the yuan, the currency, because that dropped the most on record. Well, it does sound dramatic. It's just a 0.9% drop, but it's certainly something to look forward to this week.
Well, it's the volatility that we haven't seen before, and all this coming ahead of the National People's Congress and Li Keqiang about to do that working, the
work report that comes out.
That comes out. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's this week. Two things here. You have the work report, and of course they're also outlining their strategy or their policies for this year. They come up with a growth target. That's what business will be looking for, as well as perhaps other things like how they're going to deal with this pileup in debt, how they're going to deal with local government finances. Now that aside, though, and this also has to do with the economy. Pollution, air pollution, because it comes at a time when the challenges of China are staring them literally in the face. I guess to set things up, let's listen in first to the spokesperson of the CPPCC, a bit of a mouthful, and he talked about how pollution, of course, is one of the big challenges right now. Listen in.
Got it.
We call on the government to step up efforts in prevention and treatment, enhance legislation and supervision. And we call on the businesses to fulfill their corporate social responsibilities, and we call on the members of the general public to take an active part in such campaigns so that we can form a synergy effectively confronting air pollution. We know that the treatment of air pollution is a long and difficult process, but we do hope that clear skies will not be a distant dream.
And obviously this ties into another important area for the government, which is social unrest. We just talked about the violence, of course, in Kunming on the weekend. Now, while that is being called a terrorist attack, it's also a symptom of, the challenge of dividing the economic pie equally, especially along, with minorities, of course, in the West. China is a big country, and it's not only in the West. You do have a lot of these minorities spread out across China. So how do you share that wealth?